Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Diplomacy works best when everyone follows protocol. Humans, as it happens, treat protocol like a suggestion from a distant relative they don't particularly like. The harmonious convergence hung in the void like a massive crystalline snowflake having an identity crisis. Its halls stretched wide enough to accommodate species that measured their height in stories, and its environmental systems could shift from methane-rich atmospheres to hard vacuum in under 30 seconds. A marvel of engineering, a testament to cooperation, and, currently, the stage for what would either be remembered as humanity's finest hour or its most spectacular failure. Probably both, knowing humans. At the heart of the station sat the Grand Council Chamber, a vast amphitheater where representatives from 63 different species gathered to debate, argue, and occasionally threaten each other with economic sanctions. Today's session was supposed to be routine, humanity's petition for expanded trade routes through the outer spiral. Nothing controversial, nothing dangerous, just boring economic policy that would make absolutely anyone fall asleep. Elodie stood at the central podium, a holographic display floating beside her like an obedient pet. She was 32, which made her simultaneously too young to be taken seriously by half the species present and ancient by the standards of others. Dark hair pulled back in what she hoped was a professional style, though 3 hours into the presentation, it was starting to rebel. Her uniform, official regalia of the diplomatic corps, was crisp, formal, and deeply uncomfortable in all the ways that mattered. She'd been talking for approximately 2 hours and 18 minutes. She knew this because the Ngathi representative had been counting, their multifaceted eyes tracking every second with the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry in slow motion. And, as you can see from the economic projections, Elodie continued, gesturing to a graph that she was reasonably certain nobody was actually looking at, the proposed trade routes would reduce transit time by approximately 22% while increasing. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened. Not unusual. Delegates came and went. Getting 63 species to agree on anything, including punctuality, was like herding cats. Assuming the cats were the size of buildings, and some of them breathed chlorine. What was unusual was the silence that followed. The Kumrai delegation entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Metaphorically speaking, actual temperature remained a carefully calibrated 21 Celsius. Because environmental systems didn't care about dramatic tension, Ambassador Kolmin moved with the kind of grace that made predators so terrifying. Effortless, economical, every muscle serving a purpose. He stood roughly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, his body a sleek arrangement of midnight blue fur and overlapping crystalline plates that caught light like fractured starlight. 6 limbs, because apparently 4 wasn't enough, moved in perfect synchronization. His face, and Elodie used that term loosely, was all angles and teeth, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Also absolutely capable of tearing through bulkhead plating. The Kumrai weren't just predators, they were apex predators who'd studied their food chain, found it boring, and invented space travel just to find something more interesting to hunt. They'd been part of the council for 600 years and had spent most of that time making everyone else deeply, profoundly nervous. Quillman wasn't alone. Behind him, moving with the ungainly enthusiasm of youth, came Nalkis. The young Kumrai was smaller, only about 2 meters tall, and their crystalline plates hadn't fully hardened yet, giving them an almost iridescent quality. Where Kuhlman moved with purpose, Nalkis moved with curiosity, head swiveling to take in everything, tail lashing with barely contained energy. Elodie had seen puppies with more self-control. Very large, very toothy puppies that could probably bite through steel. Ambassador Quelmin, the council speaker announced, their translation device rendering chittering language into something resembling standard. You honor us with your presence. Translation: You're late, and we're annoyed. But you're terrifying, so we'll be polite about it. Quelmin inclined his head, a gesture that appeared both regal and vaguely threatening. We are honored, council speaker. Please, continue. We would not wish to interrupt. He moved to the Kumrai delegation's seating area, a raised platform designed to accommodate their size, and settled with fluid grace. Nalkis followed, though their version of settling involved significantly more fidgeting. Elodie cleared her throat and returned to her presentation. As I was saying, the economic benefits would be... Nalkis was staring at her. Not unusual. Humans were still a novelty. They'd only joined the council 8 months ago, and most species were still trying to figure out what to make of them. Prevailing theories ranged from dangerously insane to fascinatingly insane, with very little middle ground. Elodie continued her presentation, trying to ignore the weight of that golden gaze. She pulled up another hologram, this one showing shipping lane configurations. The proposed routes would intersect with existing Boro-Ush trade networks, creating opportunities for... Nalkis stood up. Quelmin's head snapped toward his offspring, eyes narrowing. He made a sound, low, rumbling, the kind of sound that said, "Sit down right now," in any language. Nalkis sat for approximately 5 seconds, then stood again, tail lashing with what could only be described as teenage defiance. Multiple delegates shifted uncomfortably. Vinala, the Venarii representative, ruffled her crest feathers in obvious distress. Her species found physical unpredictability deeply disturbing, and Nalkis was being aggressively unpredictable. Elodie pressed on, because that's what humans did when things got awkward. They pretended everything was fine and pushed forward with determination that bordered on delusion. Secondary benefits would include increased cultural exchange, allowing for... Nalkis was moving, down from the platform, across the polished floor, weaving between other delegates with the kind of oblivious confidence that only teenagers possessed. Multiple representatives pulled back, creating a widening circle of space around the young Kumrai. Quelmin rose, every line of his body radiating embarrassment and mounting concern. He made another sound, sharper this time. Nalkis ignored him completely. The young Kumrai approached the central podium where Elodie stood. Up close, they were even more impressive, all coiled muscle and gleaming plates, with eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. Their breath came in soft huffs, and Elodie could smell something like cinnamon and ozone. Elodie said, eloquent as always. Hello? Nalkis tilted their head, studying her with the intensity of someone encountering a particularly fascinating puzzle. One clawed hand reached out, surprisingly gentle, and touched the fabric of her sleeve. Standard-issue diplomatic wear. Durable, stain-resistant. Allegedly tear-proof. Manufacturers had tested it against dozens of environmental hazards. They had not, apparently, tested it against curious teenage apex predators. Nalkis grabbed her sleeve between crystalline teeth and pulled. The room exploded into chaos. Not literal chaos, nobody actually exploded, but noise level went from respectfully quiet to catastrophically loud in under 2 seconds. Delegates were shouting, alarms were chirping, and somewhere in the background, Elodie could hear Vinala making a sound like a tea kettle having a nervous breakdown. Quelmin was moving, crossing the chamber floor with speed, that should not have been possible for something his size. His expression, as much as Elodie could read Kumrai expressions, was pure parental horror, the universal sentiment of every parent who'd watched their child do something catastrophically stupid in public. "Nalkis, release immediately." His voice carried the weight of command, the kind of tone that said this was not a request. Standard diplomatic response to having one's sleeve grabbed by an apex predator would be, freeze, don't make eye contact, and pray that security arrives before digestion begins. The council had entire protocols for this. Handbooks, training seminars, possibly interpretive dance routines, knowing the council's love of bureaucracy. Elodie studied Nalkis. The young Kumrai studied back, sleeves still clamped firmly in their jaws. Those golden eyes held no malice, no aggression, just curiosity, and maybe a bit of playfulness. She'd seen this exact expression before. On her sister's dog when it stole socks. On her neighbor's cat when it brought home questionable prizes. On every young creature that saw the world as an interesting place full of things to investigate, preferably with one's mouth. And because Elodie was human, and humans had a long, storied history of making decisions that seemed absolutely insane to outside observers, she smiled. "Oh, you want to play tug-of-war?" she said, her voice light, almost amused. Then she tugged back. Silence followed, the kind of silence that happens right before something either very good or very bad occurs. The kind of silence where the universe itself seems to hold its breath, waiting to see which way things will fall. Nalkis's eyes widened. Their grip on her sleeve tightened, not aggressively, but with delighted surprise. Their tail began to wag. Quelmin stopped mid-stride, frozen in an expression that somehow conveyed absolute disbelief, despite having a face composed primarily of teeth and anger. And Elodie, because apparently she'd decided that today was a fantastic day to throw her entire career into a black hole, grinned wider and tugged again. Nalkis made a sound that could only be described as delighted, a sort of chirruping growl that rattled their crystalline plates and made their whole body vibrate with excitement. They pulled back on the sleeve, not hard enough to tear it, but with enough enthusiasm to make Elodie take a half-step forward. She laughed, actually laughed, bright and genuine, as if she wasn't currently engaged in a physical contest with a creature that could probably use her spine as a toothpick. "Oh, you've got a good grip there," she said, voice full of approval that any dog trainer would recognize. "Very impressive, but I think I've got you beat." She gave another tug, this time with a bit more force, and Nalkis practically bounced with joy. Their tail was going like a metronome on stimulants, and they shifted their weight, clearly preparing for another pull. Quelmin had finally reached them. He stood there, all 3 meters of apex predator magnificence, and for the first time in his 600-year diplomatic career appeared to have absolutely no idea what to do. "Human Elodie," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled something. Panic? Confusion? Existential dread? Hard to tell. "Please, release my offspring. This behavior is fun," Elodie supplied, giving the sleeve another playful tug. Nalkis responded with what could only be called a play growl, the kind that puppies made when they were having the time of their lives. "Yeah, they seem to be enjoying themselves. Aren't you, little one?" Little one. She'd just called a 2-meter-tall apex predator little one. From somewhere in the assembly, Bulwoon, the Boraush trade representative, made a wet, gurgling sound that his translator rendered as hysterical laughter. She's playing with it, with the Kumrai spawn. She's playing." "This is unprecedented," Ngul announced, their high voice carrying that peculiar harmonic quality that suggested multiple minds speaking in unison. We are documenting this interaction for future analysis. The human displays no fear response. Cortisol levels appear minimal. Heart rate elevated, but consistent with enjoyment? "Somebody stop this!" Vinala's voice cracked with distress. She'd risen from her perch, wings half spread in agitation. Physical contact is sacred, private, not for public display with predators." "Oh, calm your feathers," Elodie said, not unkindly, while simultaneously playing an impromptu game of tug-of-war with an adolescent killing machine. "We're just having a bit of fun. Nobody's getting hurt. Are you getting hurt, Ambassador Quillman? Is your kid getting hurt? Because from where I'm standing, everyone seems fine." Quillman opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound emerged. His translator made a small, distressed beeping noise, as if it too was struggling to find appropriate words. "This is a dominance display," someone else called out. Elodie couldn't see who. Her attention was focused on Nalkis, who'd just discovered that if they pulled to the left, Elodie would stumble slightly, which was apparently hilarious. "The human is challenging Kumrai authority." "I'm really not," Elodie said, slightly out of breath now. Nalkis was strong. "I'm just... Okay, you've got good lateral movement. I'll give you that." She shifted her stance, bracing herself better, and pulled back with renewed vigor. Nalkis responded with obvious glee, their whole body engaged in the game now. Their crystalline plates caught the chamber's lights, throwing rainbow refractions across the polished floor. "Security!" Vinala was practically shrieking now. "Call security! The human has gone mad! The Kumrai spawn is attacking!" "Nobody's attacking anybody," Elodie managed, though she was definitely getting a workout now. "This is what we call playing. You know, fun, bonding, social interaction that doesn't involve formal protocols, and—" "Whoa, okay, strong pull there." Nalkis had discovered leverage. They'd planted their back legs and pulled with surprising force, and Elodie found herself sliding forward on the smooth floor. She laughed again, delighted despite herself, and dug in her heels. "Oh, it's like that, is it?" she said, grinning. "All right, kiddo, let's see what you've got." That's when the alarms started. Not the polite, discreet alarms that signaled minor issues. These were the loud, obnoxious alarms that suggested something had gone catastrophically wrong. Red lights began flashing along the chamber walls, and a synthetic voice, calm in that deeply unsettling way that emergency systems always were, announced, "Security protocol engaged, potential hostage situation detected, initiating lockdown in 30 seconds. Elodie stopped mid-tug. "Wait, what? Lockdown?" Woon's translator managed to convey perfect panic despite his amphibious biology. "We're being locked in?" "The station AI has misinterpreted the situation," Ningul observed with the kind of clinical detachment that suggested they found this fascinating rather than alarming. "It perceives human Elodie as being under physical assault. Standard protocols require isolation and containment." "I'm not being assaulted," Elodie protested, though she was still technically engaged in tug-of-war with Nalkis, who seemed utterly unconcerned with the alarms and was trying to initiate another round. "I'm fine. Everything's fine. Lockdown in 20 seconds," the synthetic voice continued unhelpfully. "All delegates will remain in the chamber until security personnel can assess the situation." Kelman finally found his voice. "This is unacceptable. My offspring meant no harm. Release the lockdown immediately." "Unable to comply," the AI responded. "Human life signs indicate distress." I'm not in distress, Elodie shouted at the ceiling. I'm playing. Do you not have playing in your behavioral database? Locked down in 10 seconds. Oh, for Elodie finally released her sleeve. Nalkiss, surprised by the sudden lack of resistance, stumbled backward slightly, then sat down with a thump that rattled their plates. They looked up at her with what could only be described as disappointment. Sorry, kiddo, Elodie said, reaching into her jacket pocket. We'll continue this in a minute. First, I need to convince the station that I'm not being murdered. She pulled out a small ration bar, standard-issue emergency supplies that every diplomat carried, and held it up. Hey, Station AI, if I was being attacked, would I be calmly offering snacks? Lockdown in 5 seconds. That's not an answer. Elodie unwrapped the ration bar, beef jerky, because, of course, humanity's idea of emergency rations involved preserved meat, and offered a piece to Nalkiss. Here, you want a treat? Good kids get treats. Nalkiss sniffed the jerky with obvious curiosity. Their tongue, purple, forked, and far too long, flicked out to taste it. Then, with surprising delicacy, they took the piece from Elodie's hand and swallowed it whole. Their eyes went wide. Lockdown in... The AI paused. Reassessing situation. Quillmin made a strangled sound. You just fed my offspring preserved animal protein from your hand, while telling them, that they were good. Yeah? Elodie offered another piece of jerky to Nalkiss, who accepted it with even more enthusiasm. They are good, very good, excellent tug-of-war technique, could work on the lateral stability, but overall, solid performance. The human is domesticating the Kumrai spawn, Ingul announced, voice filled with something that might have been awe. In real time, we are witnessing active domestication protocols. I'm not domesticating anyone, Elodie protested, while absolutely continuing to feed Nalkiss pieces of jerky. I'm just being friendly. It's what humans do. Lockdown cancelled, the AI finally announced. Human life signs now consistent with positive social interaction. Apologies for the confusion. Vinala made a sound like wind through broken chimes. Positive social interaction? She's feeding a predator. By hand. This is madness. This is diplomacy, Elodie countered, offering the last piece of jerky to Nalkiss, who was now sitting at her feet like the world's most terrifying, oversized puppy. Just unconventional diplomacy. Bulwoon's laughter had evolved into full-body convulsions. His translation device was struggling to keep up. Unconventional. That's, ancestors preserve us. That's what you're calling this? Quillmin was still frozen in place, watching his offspring accept food from a human's hand, with the kind of expression that suggested he was reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. Ambassador, Elodie said gently, crouching down to be more level with Nalkiss. With respect, I think your kid just wanted to say hello. In, the way kids do, by grabbing things and putting them in their mouths. The way, Quellman's translator actually sputtered. That is not, we do not. You don't have juvenile play behavior in Kumrai culture? Elodie asked, genuinely curious now. She was absently scratching behind one of Nalkiss's auditory ridges, and the young Kumrai had started making a sound suspiciously like purring. Because I've got to tell you, this one seems pretty interested in playing. Kumrai young engage in combat practice, Quillmin said stiffly. Hunting simulations. Dominance establishment. Not this. Not fun? Elodie supplied. Nalkiss had rolled onto their back now, all 6 legs in the air, clearly hoping for belly rubs. She obliged, because apparently she'd completely abandoned any sense of self-preservation. Because I've got news for you, Ambassador. Your kid definitely wants to have fun. The assembled delegates watched in various states of shock, horror, and fascination as a human woman gave belly rubs to an apex predator while discussing child-rearing philosophies with said predator's increasingly distressed parent. This entire situation is deeply inappropriate, Vinala insisted, though her voice had lost some of its shrill panic. Physical contact is how humans bond, Elodie interrupted, not taking her attention off Nalkis. We're tactile creatures. We hug, we shake hands, we pat each other on the back. And yeah, we play with our young. All our young, not just human kids. We play with other species' young too. It's kind of our thing. She pulled out her data pad, the ceremonial one that she'd been using for the presentation, and pulled up a holographic image. See? This is my sister's dog. That's me when I was 8. We played tug-of-war all the time. The image showed a younger Elodie, gap-toothed and grinning, pulling on a rope while a large, fluffy dog pulled the other end. That is a predator, someone observed unnecessarily. That's a golden retriever, Elodie corrected. Domesticated wolf descendant. Humans took apex predators and turned them into best friends. It's literally what we do. She swiped to another image. That's a cat. Smaller predator, still plenty capable of doing damage. We let them live in our homes. This one? Tiger. Endangered. But we've got sanctuaries where humans work with them directly. Swipe. Sharks. We swim with them. For fun. Swipe. Venomous snakes. We keep them as pets. Swipe. That's a bear cub at a rehabilitation center. Yes, we rehabilitate bears. Each image was met with increasing disbelief from the assembled delegates. You're insane, Vinala breathed. Your entire species is insane. Maybe, Elodie agreed cheerfully, still scratching Nalkis's belly. The young Kumrai was making sounds of contentment that their translator was rendering as something between a purr and a rumble. But we're friendly, insane. There's a difference. Quelman finally moved, approaching slowly. He studied his offspring, who was clearly in a state of blissful relaxation, then studied Elodie, who was smiling like this was the most normal thing in the world. You see my child as... He paused, translator struggling. As a companion animal? I see your kid as a kid, Elodie corrected gently. A young person who's curious about the universe and wanted to investigate something new. That's not a threat. That's just youth, growth, learning. She stood up slowly, and Nalkis rolled back onto their feet, looking disappointed that the belly rubs had ended. On my planet, when young creatures approach us with curiosity instead of fear, we consider it a privilege. It means they trust us. And yeah, sometimes that trust comes with teeth marks on our sleeves, but that's okay. It's worth it. Quelman was quiet for a long moment. Around the chamber, delegates were still processing what they'd witnessed. Nengul was taking notes, or whatever hive minds did that counted as note-taking. Bulwoon had finally stopped laughing but was still making small wheezing sounds. Vinala had settled back onto her perch but kept her wings half spread, ready to flee at any moment. You are a very strange species, Quelman said finally. Elodie grinned. Yeah, we get that a lot. Nalkis, apparently deciding that the conversation had gone on long enough without more playing, grabbed Elodie's sleeve again. This time, nobody screamed. Quelmin requested a private audience 30 minutes later, after Elodie had finally convinced Nalkis that the sleeve needed to remain attached to her jacket for professional reasons. The young Kumrai had eventually agreed, mostly because Elodie had promised to show them more human games afterward. They gathered in a smaller chamber adjacent to the main hall, still absurdly large by human standards, but intimate compared to the amphitheater. Quelmin had brought Nalkis, who was now sitting with surprising patience, though their tail still twitched with barely contained energy. Elodie had brought her datapad and what remained of her dignity. Several other delegates had invited themselves along. Nengul, because a hive mind couldn't resist gathering data. Bulwun, who claimed it was economic interest, but was clearly just entertained. Vinala, who insisted someone needed to maintain proper protocol, even if everyone else had abandoned sanity. And Ulm Kara, the ancient silicon-based delegate, who rarely spoke but seemed interested in this particular disaster. "Explain," Kulmin said without preamble. "Explain how your species functions, because what I witnessed today contradicts every behavioral model we have constructed regarding predator-prey dynamics." Elodie settled into a chair that had been designed for someone with different anatomy and made it work anyway. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." Quelmin's golden eyes were intense. "Start with why you did not flee when Nalkis approached. Flight response should be instinctual when confronted by a predator species." "Should be," Elodie agreed. "But humans have complicated instincts. We're persistence hunters originally. We didn't flee from predators, we outlasted them, chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. Then we looked at them and thought, what if we made friends instead?" "Friends." Quelmin repeated the word like it was a foreign concept, which, given the translation matrix, it probably was. "With predators." "Especially with predators," Elodie corrected. She pulled up her data pad again, projecting a new series of images. "Okay, history lesson. 30,000 years ago, give or take, humans encountered wolves. Apex predators, pack hunters, incredibly dangerous. Should have been competitors for resources. Instead, we partnered up." The image showed ancient cave paintings, humans and canines hunting together. "Both species benefited," she continued. "Wolves got consistent food sources and protection. Humans got better hunting success and security. But more than that, we got companionship. Over thousands of years, we didn't just domesticate wolves. We integrated them into our social structures." Nengul's multifaceted eyes reflected the hologram with prismatic intensity. "This domestication process, how long did it require?" "Generations, centuries. We selectively bred for traits we wanted: loyalty, cooperation, reduced aggression toward humans. But here's what's interesting. We kept the predator nature. Dogs are still predators. They still hunt, still have teeth, still have all those instincts. We just channeled those instincts into partnership." She switched images, showing modern dogs in various roles: search and rescue, police work, therapy animals, companions for children and elderly. "We created hundreds of breeds, each specialized for different tasks. But all of them, every single one, still carries that wolf ancestry." Bulwun's throat sac inflated and deflated thoughtfully. "But surely this is unique to canines. An anomaly?" Elodie laughed. "Oh no, we did it with cats, obligate carnivores that hunt for sport, birds of prey that we trained for falconry, horses that could easily kill us with one kick. We looked at dangerous animals and said, what if we made them part of the family?" "This is insanity," Vinala muttered. "Functional insanity, but insanity nonetheless." "Maybe," Elodie conceded, "but it worked. And more than that, it became fundamental to who we are as a species. Humans bond. We bond with each other, with other species, with anything that shows even remote potential for emotional connection. We've bonded with robots, plants, rocks that we've assigned personalities to. Rocks? Quellman's translator seemed uncertain about that word. Rocks, Elodie confirmed. We're ridiculous. But here's what matters for this conversation. We see potential companions everywhere. When Nalkis approached me, I didn't see a threat. I saw a curious youngster wanting to interact. That's not naivety. That's pattern recognition. I've been around enough young creatures to recognize play behavior. She gestured to Nalkis, who was listening with clear interest, despite probably not understanding most of the conversation. Your kid grabbed my sleeve the same way puppies grab toys. The tail movement, the body language, the sound they made, all play signals. So I responded to play with play. Quellman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested this was more than academic curiosity. Kumrai young are problematic in galactic society. How so? We are a physical species. Our young learn through combat, through hunting practice, through direct interaction. But other species find this threatening. They interpret normal juvenile behavior as aggression. Our children are isolated, kept separate from other young beings. They grow up without peers outside our species. Quellman's crystalline plates shifted, a gesture Elodie was starting to recognize as distress. Nalkis has never played with anyone outside our family unit, has never experienced acceptance from another species. Today was the first time they approached a non-Kumrai without being rejected or feared. Something clicked in Elodie's mind. That's why you brought them to the council session. You were hoping for interaction. Hoping, fearing, both. Quellman's eyes flickered to his offspring. Nalkis is curious about other species, wants to learn, to engage, but every attempt has ended in panic or formal complaints. I thought, perhaps in the council chamber, surrounded by security and protocol, a supervised interaction might be possible. I did not expect— You didn't expect a human to tug back, Elodie finished. No. Elodie stood up, moving slowly so as not to startle anyone, and approached Nalkis. The young Kumrai watched, her with those intelligent golden eyes, tail starting to wag again. Hey, kiddo, she said softly. Want to learn something new? Nalkis chirruped, an affirmative sound, according to her translator. Elodie held out her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. This is how humans greet each other when we want to be friendly. It's called a handshake. You touch your hand to mine, gentle contact, and it means we're friends. Want to try? Nalkis extended one clawed hand slowly, carefully, and placed it against Elodie's palm. Their claws were retracted as much as possible, and the touch was feather light, as if they were afraid of hurting her. Perfect, Elodie said, smiling. Now we move them up and down a bit. See? That's a handshake. You just made a friend. Nalkis made a sound that the translator rendered as wonder. Human Elodie, Quellman said, and his voice had changed somehow. Less formal, more vulnerable. Would your species consider a cultural exchange? Elodie turned to face him, still holding Nalkis's hand. What kind of exchange? We have tried integration with multiple species. None succeeded. Your people understand pack dynamics, predator behavior, physical interaction. Perhaps where others failed, humans might. He trailed off, seeming uncertain how to continue. Ningul spoke up, their hive voice carrying unusual gentleness. Ambassador Quellman is asking if humanity would help socialize Kumrai youth, Teach them to interact with other species. Provide the companionship and acceptance they currently lack. You want us to, Elodie processed this. You want humans to help raise your kids? Not raise, Quillman clarified quickly, but interact with, play with, show them that they can be part of the greater galactic community without being feared or isolated. Elodie thought about every dog she'd ever trained, every nervous cat she'd socialized, every creature she'd worked with in her xenobiology studies. Then she thought about Nelkis, sitting here holding her hand with such careful gentleness despite being more than capable of tearing her apart. It's a risk, she said slowly. Your kids are strong, dangerous by human standards. There would be accidents, injuries, probably. We would understand, but, Elodie continued, humans have been getting bitten by our friends for thousands of years. We've learned to accept that bonding sometimes comes with scratches. So yeah, Ambassador, I think humanity would be interested in this exchange. Quillman's entire body seemed to relax, plates settling into a configuration that suggested relief. However, Elodie added, I can't promise we won't accidentally adopt your entire younger generation. We're very bad at maintaining professional distance with cute things. Nelkis is not cute, Quillman protested. They are a fierce predator in training. Elodie looked at Nelkis, who was still holding her hand, and had started making that purring sound again. Sure, very fierce, absolutely terrifying. Bulwoon made that wet, gurgling laugh again. The humans have been here 8 months, and they're already adopting council members' children. At this rate, in 5 years, they'll have befriended half the station. Ulmkara spoke for the first time, her voice like rocks grinding together. Some species reached for the stars with weapons, some with wisdom. Humans reached with open arms. She paused, her ancient eyes fixing on Elodie. Whether this is brilliant or catastrophically foolish remains to be determined. Elodie grinned. Why not both? They returned to the main chamber an hour later. News of what had happened had already spread through the station's gossip networks, which, despite being composed of dozens of species with wildly different communication methods, somehow functioned with the efficiency of a small-town rumor mill. Elodie walked beside Quillman, while Nelkis walked on her other side. Not behind, not being dragged, walking alongside like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The young Kumrathi's tail swayed in a relaxed rhythm, and occasionally they'd bump gently against Elodie's side, the way young dogs checked in with their humans during walks. The assembled delegates watched their entrance with expressions ranging from shock to resignation to, in Bulwoon's case, barely suppressed amusement. Honored delegates, Quillman began, his voice carrying across the chamber with formal authority. I wish to propose an amendment to the human trade route petition currently under consideration. Council speaker gestured for him to continue, their translator catching the note of curiosity in their chittering. The council recognizes Ambassador Quillman. The Kumrathi Empire wishes to sponsor a cultural exchange program between our species and humanity. We propose that human liaisons be granted access to Kumrathi educational facilities, recreational spaces, and family units for the purpose of, he paused, translator working overtime, socialization, integration. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Multiple delegates began speaking at once. This is unprecedented. The Kumrathi never allow outsiders near their young. Is this because of the sleeve incident? It's absolutely because of the sleeve incident. Council speaker called for order. Ambassador, clarify your proposal. Quelman's plates shifted in what Elodie was learning to recognize as determination. For 600 years, my people have struggled to integrate our youth into galactic society. Other species find our young threatening. Our children grow up isolated, resentful, unable to form bonds outside our species. This creates cultural stagnation and increasing social problems. He gestured toward Elodie and Nalkis. Today, a human showed us an alternative. Not fear, not formal protocol, simply acceptance and play. My offspring has interacted more genuinely with human Elodie in one afternoon than with any non-Kumrai in their entire life. Nalkis, as if on cue, leaned against Elodie's side again. She absently placed a hand on their shoulder, scratching behind an auditory ridge. The young Kumrai made that purring sound that was becoming familiar. Vinala's crest feathers were doing complicated things that suggested deep internal conflict. You propose that humans, the species that has been part of this council for less than one standard year, should have direct access to Kumrai young, the same humans who just demonstrated a complete disregard for safety protocols? Yes, Kulmin said simply. That's insane. Perhaps, Kulmin agreed. But observe the result. All eyes turned to Nalkis, who was now leaning their full weight against Elodie. She'd adjusted her stance to support them, still scratching that apparently magical spot behind their ridge, and was smiling like this was the most natural thing in the universe. Ningul's voice carried harmonic fascination. The young Kumrai displays complete trust. Body language indicates relaxation, contentment, and bonding behavior typically reserved for family units. Human Elodie has achieved in hours what formal diplomatic protocols have failed to accomplish in decades. Because she ignored the protocols, Vinala protested. Because she saw a child instead of a threat, Quelmin corrected. That is the human advantage. They do not approach interaction through fear or hierarchy. They approach through companionship. Elodie cleared her throat. If I may, I should probably mention that this could go badly. Humans are enthusiastic about bonding. We might get too attached. We might blur professional boundaries. We will definitely get bitten, scratched, and probably injured in ways that would horrify safety committees. And yet you advocate for this program? Council Speaker asked. Absolutely, Elodie said without hesitation. Because bonding is worth the risk. Connection is worth the injuries. We've learned this over thousands of years of working with creatures that could easily harm us. The scratches heal. The friendships last. She looked down at Nalkis, who gazed back with those intelligent golden eyes. Besides, I think your kids are worth the effort. They deserve to have friends outside their species. They deserve to be accepted, not feared. Bulwoon's throat sac inflated thoughtfully. From an economic standpoint, this partnership could be remarkably beneficial. Kumrai youth integrated into broader galactic culture would increase trade opportunities, reduce cultural tensions, and, potentially, open new markets. The humans gain what, exactly? Elodie grinned. Friends. We gain friends. That's enough for us. Your species operates on baffling priorities, Bulwoon observed, though his tone suggested admiration rather than criticism. We really do, Elodie agreed cheerfully. Council Speaker consulted with other delegates in hushed tones. Minutes passed. Nalkis grew restless and started nibbling on Elodie's sleeve again, gently this time, more out of habit than actual play. She let them, recognizing it as a comfort behavior. Finally, Council Speaker addressed the chamber. This proposal is highly irregular. However, given the Kumrai Empire's formal sponsorship and the demonstrated success of initial contact, the Council will consider a pilot program, small-scale, supervised, with extensive documentation and safety protocols. Safety protocols that the humans will probably ignore, Vinala muttered. Safety protocols that will adapt to actual behavior rather than theoretical models, Elodie countered. There's a difference. Quelmin inclined his head toward Council Speaker. The Kumrai Empire accepts these terms. We propose beginning with volunteer families who wish to participate. Human liaisons would be assigned based on experience with, what was your term? Pack dynamics? Pack dynamics, animal behavior, child development, take your pick, Elodie said. We've got specialists in all of them, and probably a bunch of volunteers who just think your kids are adorable and want to play with them. They are not adorable, Quelmin began. They absolutely are, Elodie interrupted. Nalkis, show them that thing you did earlier, with the tail. Nalkis's tail began wagging enthusiastically, their whole body wiggling with excitement. Multiple delegates made sounds of surprise or dismay, or in Bulwoon's case, continued amusement. Adorable, Elodie repeated firmly. We're going to have to beat volunteers off with sticks. Ulmkara spoke again, her ancient voice carrying weight that made everyone pause. I have observed galactic politics for 8,000 of your years. I have seen species rise and fall, alliances form and shatter, wars begin and end, but never have I seen a species approach the stars with such aggressive friendliness. She fixed her gaze on Elodie. Humans have been part of this council for mere months, yet you have already begun reshaping how we interact, not through military might or economic pressure, but through the simple act of tugging back when tested. Her rocky features shifted into what might have been a smile. Some species brought weapons, some brought wisdom. You brought the audacity to befriend anything that moves. History will judge whether this is humanity's greatest strength or fatal flaw. Probably both, Elodie said, echoing her earlier statement. But we're okay with that. Council Speaker called for formal voting. The proposal passed with surprising support. Not unanimous, but solid enough to proceed. Formal documents would be drafted. Protocols established. Safety measures implemented that everyone knew humans would creatively reinterpret. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out, Nalkis seemed reluctant to leave. They kept looking back at Elodie, tail drooping slightly. Hey, Elodie said gently, crouching down to their level. I'll see you again soon, okay? We're going to set up this whole exchange program. You'll have human friends, lots of them. So many that your dad will probably regret this decision. I already regret this decision, Quelmin said, though his tone was fond. But I suspect it is the correct one, nonetheless. Nalkis pressed their head against Elodie's hand one final time, that Kumrai gesture of family trust, and then followed their father toward the exit. Elodie watched them go, then looked at her sleeve. It was thoroughly chewed, slightly damp, and definitely needed replacing. She smiled. Worth it. Nengul approached as other delegates dispersed. Human Elodie, we have documented this entire interaction for analysis. The data suggests that your species may fundamentally alter galactic social dynamics within a generation. Is that good or bad? Unknown, Nengul admitted. But fascinating. We predict that within 5 standard years, humans will have established pack bonding relationships with at least 30% of council species. Only 30%? Elodie said, mock offended. We can do better than that. As she gathered her materials and prepared to submit her revised trade proposal, now including cultural exchange provisions, Elodie reflected on how the day had unfolded. She'd come to present boring economic policy. She'd ended up playing tug-of-war with an apex predator and potentially reshaping interspecies relations. Just another day in humanity's galactic diplomacy career. Behind her, she heard Bulwoon telling another delegate, "The humans have been here 8 months. 8 months, and they're already adopting everyone's children. By next year, they'll probably have the entire station trained to fetch." Elodie grinned and didn't bother correcting him. After all, he wasn't exactly wrong.